Tonight we enter a candlelit medieval courtroom where justice does not whisper from books, but breathes from stone walls, wet wool, and watching faces. In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council forbids clergy from taking part in trials by ordeal, and a very old doorway begins to close. Historians at Oxford and Yale have long treated that decree as a turning point, because medieval justice depends on ritual as much as written law. When the ritual loses sacred approval, the whole machinery must begin to change. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the candles are still trembling, write your location and local time below. Somewhere, perhaps, another listener is lying awake under a different sky, hearing the same old bells. You stand now in a town before dawn, not grand, not silent, and certainly not clean. Smoke hangs low over timber roofs. The street smells of ash, sour ale, animal dung, damp straw, and bread not yet ready for market. A rooster cries from behind a wattle fence, sounding far too confident for such an hour. The courthouse is not always a courthouse. Sometimes it is a hall, sometimes it's a gatehouse, sometimes it's simply a room where powerful men sit higher than everyone else. That height matters. In the medieval world, justice has posture. You feel the floor under your boots. It is packed earth in some places, flagstone in others, and always cold enough to remind you that comfort is not the point. A clerk scratches at parchment with a steady little sound. The accused stands near the centre, watched by neighbours who know his debts, his temper, his family, and probably his goats. No one here thinks justice is private. That idea would seem almost suspicious. If wrong has disturbed the town, then correction must be seen by the town. The wound is public, so the answer must be public as well. A bell rings outside. It is not dramatic. It is worse. It is ordinary. This is what makes medieval justice feel so dark to modern eyes. Its cruelty does not always arrive as madness. It arrives as routine, with officials, witnesses, prayers, fees, benches, and rules. The world is not simply savage, it is organised. That is the colder truth. Records from medieval English courts confirm that many punishments were financial rather than bloody. People were fined for brewing bad ale, breaking market rules, trespass, gossip, theft, and failure to maintain roads. Scholars connected with the University of Cambridge have shown how deeply these local courts shaped daily village life. The whip and scaffold existed, yes, but so did the small grinding punishment of debt. Still, when violence came, it came with purpose. It spoke in a language everyone understood. You must imagine a society without modern police patrols, forensic laboratories, prison systems, or fast communication. A crime could not simply be filed, processed, and hidden in an archive. It had to be answered in memory. The body became a notice board. The marketplace became a warning. The crowd became the newspaper. Cruelty was not only punishment, it was messaging. There is a strange little tidbit, often repeated in discussions of medieval law, about animals being placed on trial. Pigs, dogs, rats, and even insects could be accused in certain European jurisdictions. Some stories are exaggerated, and some later writers clearly enjoy the absurdity too much. Yet records do exist of animal trials, especially involving pigs that injured children. It sounds ridiculous, then it becomes unsettling, because beneath the oddity sits a deeper habit of mind. Disorder must be named. Harm must be placed inside a ritual. Even an animal, in rare cases, could be dragged into the human theatre of blame. Medieval justice wants the world to be morally legible. Even when the world refuses, the accused man near you shifts his weight. His eyes move toward the doorway, but there is nowhere useful to go. Outside, the town is gathering, not because everyone is cruel, but because everyone is involved. Someone sold him ale. Someone lent him a knife. Someone saw him argue near the mill. Someone heard a cry. Justice begins as memory. In many regions, the law is not one single thing. It is layered, uneven, and often confusing. Royal law may reach into the town. Church courts may judge sin, marriage, oaths, and moral failure. Manorial courts may handle field boundaries, labour duties, and village disputes. A lord may claim rights over his tenants. A town may guard its own privileges with jealous pride. To live in the Middle Ages is to live under overlapping shadows. This is one reason cruelty grows. When authority is fragmented, authority must perform itself. A king far away must be made present through symbols. A lord in his hall must seem frightening enough to prevent defiance. A town council must prove that disorder will not spread from one stall to the next. Power is not invisible yet, it wears boots. An open scholarly debate remains over how much ordinary people accepted this system as legitimate. Some historians emphasize fear and domination. Others point to participation, negotiation, and local custom. Research associated with Stanford's medieval studies, scholars has often reminded readers that medieval communities were not passive scenery. They argued, bargained, accused, forgave, and remembered. That makes the darkness more complicated. The people watching punishment were not always helpless victims of elite cruelty. Sometimes they demanded justice. Sometimes they enjoyed it. Sometimes they feared being next. Sometimes all three feelings lived together in the same chest. You hear the murmur of the crowd thicken beyond the door. A woman coughs. A child is hushed. Someone laughs too loudly, then stops. The air inside smells of wax smoke and old wood, with a faint metallic edge from chains or tools nearby. The judge, or lord, or appointed official does not need to shout. In this room, quiet can be heavier than anger. He has the advantage of height, script, custom, and expectation. The accused has his body, his words, and perhaps an oath if anyone still trusts him enough to stand beside him. In a modern courtroom, truth often hides inside evidence. In a medieval one, truth may be expected to reveal itself through oath, reputation, ordeal, witness, confession, or divine sign. That does not mean medieval people are foolish. It means they inhabit a world where heaven, community, and law are tangled together. Their logic is not ours, but it is logic. The dark truth of medieval justice is not that everyone delights in pain. That is too simple, and simple answers rarely survive long in old rooms. The darker truth is that cruelty can appear reasonable when a society believes survival depends on visible correction. A thief does not merely take bread, he threatens trust in the market. A traitor does not merely betray a ruler, he tears the imagined body of the realm. A heretic does not merely hold a strange idea, he may be seen as smoke entering the lungs of the community. Once crime becomes contamination, punishment becomes cleansing. That idea sits quietly beneath the court, beneath the prayers, beneath the iron latch on the door. You can feel it in the way people watch the accused, not only as a man, but as a possible breach in the wall that protects them all. The town is fragile. Harvests fail. Infants die. Fires spread. Armies pass through. Disease enters without knocking. In such a world, mercy may feel dangerous, and yet mercy exists. It waits at the edges, in pardons, substitutions, payments, penance, sanctuary, and the intervention of friends. Medieval justice is cruel, but it is not always mechanical. It bends for status, money, gender, reputation, holy days, politics, and sometimes pity. That bending can look humane. It can also look corrupt. You notice the clerk again, still writing. His hand preserves what the body may soon suffer. That is another unsettling feature. Violence passes, but records remain. A name, a fine, a judgment, a mark in ink. The medieval world, often imagined as chaotic, is full of lists. There are lists of debts, lists of offenders, lists of tools, lists of rents, lists of bodies owed service, lists of sins confessed softly behind screens. Justice lives in those lists too. The courtroom grows brighter as morning leaks through the cracks. Dust turns golden in the air, beautiful in a room that is not kind. The accused is asked a question. Perhaps he answers clearly. Perhaps he hesitates. Perhaps everyone already knows what they believe, and the ritual is only catching up with rumour. This is where the cruelty begins, not with blood, but with certainty, because once a community feels certain, it can do terrible things calmly. It can call them necessary. It can call them lawful. It can call them peace. And you remain there in the half-light, listening to the bell fade across the town, sensing that medieval justice is not a monster from another species. It is a mirror from another age, smoky and warped, but still reflecting something human. Perhaps that is why it unsettles you. It is distant, and yet not distant enough. You find yourself beneath a timbered hall where law is not written in one voice, but spoken through many mouths. The morning has widened over the settlement. Smoke rises from hearth-holes. Geese complain near a ditch. A cartwheel groans in mud, making that tired wooden sound which seems older than language. Somewhere nearby, a smith strikes iron, and the rhythm carries through the lane like a warning disguised as work. Here, justice does not belong to one clean institution, it belongs to a web. A lord claims rights over his tenants, a bishop claims authority over souls, a king claims peace over roads, bridges, towns, and bloodshed. A village claims memory. Each layer pulls at the same human trouble, and each insists that its own grip is lawful. This is not a neat age. In many medieval communities, you're not simply a private person standing alone before the state. You are someone's tenant, someone's neighbour, someone's parishioner, someone's debtor, someone's kin. Your legal identity is stitched from obligations. Pull one thread, and half the village feels the tug. Records from English manorial courts confirm how ordinary this structure was. Scholars at the University of Chicago and Oxford have studied surviving rolls filled with small disputes over grazing, brewing, inheritance, broken fences, unpaid labour, and damaged crops. Such records prove that medieval justice is often local, repetitive, and deeply practical. Not every case leads to chains. Sometimes the punishment is a fine for letting pigs wander where they should not. Sometimes it's a fee for baking bread below the required weight. Sometimes it is an order to repair a ditch, return a cloak, pay a debt, or stop insulting a neighbour with impressive consistency. People have always been talented at annoying one another, yet beneath these ordinary disputes lies something severe. Medieval order depends on everyone knowing their place, not only socially, but legally. A tenant owes labour. A lord owes protection, at least in theory. A priest owes guidance. A king owes peace. A widow may claim certain rights. A villain may have customary protections. Even hierarchy needs rules to keep itself believable. When rules fail, authority trembles. You enter a manor court held in a draughty hall, perhaps attached to an estate where fields stretch outward in strips. Men stand with caps in hand. Women appear too, especially in matters of brewing, debt, land transfers, or household economies. The room smells of damp wool, rushes, smoke, and the sharp sourness of stored ale. A steward presides in the lord's name. He may not be noble himself, but in this room he carries borrowed power. That borrowed quality matters. Medieval justice is often delegated, rented, shared, and performed through representatives who must convince everyone that the absent lord is still present. The parchment roll lies open. It is strangely powerful, A name written there becomes part of a public memory. A fine is entered, a failure is noted, a pledge is demanded. To us, such paperwork may feel dull. To the people in the hall, it can mean humiliation, cost, and lasting reputation. There is an open scholarly debate about whether these courts mainly oppressed peasants or offered them tools. Some researchers connected with Yale's work on medieval legal culture emphasize lordship and extraction. Others argue that villagers used courts strategically, pressing claims against neighbours and even defending custom against landlords. Both views can be true. Power can exploit you while giving you procedures to exploit in return. That is one of history's colder jokes. The same court that finds a poor brewer may also protect her claim to a small tenancy, because custom is not merely kindness. It is the memory of what people have managed to make enforceable. You hear a dispute over a boundary. Two men disagree about where one strip ends and another begins. The argument sounds small. It is not small. Land is food, rent, marriage prospects, survival, and status. A misplaced furrow can become a family wound. Witnesses step forward. They do not speak like modern experts. They speak as people who remember. They remember a hedge. They remember a stone. They remember where an old man once stood during harvest 20 years earlier. Memory becomes measurement. The court listens because the landscape itself is partly held in human minds. A quirky legal tidbit appears in some medieval records where communities use objects as symbols of transfer. A clod of earth, a twig, a knife, or a glove can represent land or authority changing hands. The gesture may look theatrical, but it solves a real problem in a world where literacy is limited and memory needs something to hold. A handful of soil becomes a document. You can almost feel it in your palm, cold and granular, smelling of rain and roots. That small object says what a written deed may say elsewhere. This belongs, this passes, this binds. Medieval justice is full of such physical signs because it trusts the visible, the touched, the witnessed. Law must be seen to live. Beyond the manor, royal courts begin to grow more ambitious across parts of Europe. In England especially, the King's Peace expands through travelling justices, writs, juries, and procedures that draw local disputes into a wider legal net. This development is not simply a tale of progress. It is also a tale of kings discovering that justice creates authority, revenue, and reach. A king who judges can also count. Fines flow upward. Forfeited goods matter. Court fees matter. Legal centralization has a moral face and a hungry stomach. It promises order, but it also gathers resources. That dual nature is everywhere in medieval justice, like candlelight and shadow moving together on the same wall. You walk from the manor hall toward the town gate. The road is rutted and damp, bordered by thorn and trampled grass. A dog follows for a while, then loses interest. At the gate, tolls may be taken. Beyond it, the King's Road waits, dangerous but legally meaningful. Roads are more than roads, they are arteries of royal peace. Robbery on the highway can become more than theft, because it challenges the ruler's claim to protect movement. Marketplaces, bridges, and main roads often carry special legal significance. Medieval kings do not need to be everywhere physically. They need their peace to be imagined everywhere. That imagination requires punishment. Yet local custom does not vanish when royal law grows. People still settle disputes through negotiation, kinship, payment, oath, and pressure. A quarrel may pass through several doors before reaching harsh judgment. Medieval people are often more legally flexible than modern stereotypes allow. They are not waiting for brutality. They are trying to survive it, avoid it, use it, and sometimes summon it against others. The village knows this. It knows which lord is greedy, which steward can be softened, which priest keeps secrets poorly, which neighbour lies, and which family never forgets an insult. Justice is not abstract here. It has faces. This personal quality can soften punishment, but it can also sharpen it. A stranger may receive less trust. A poor woman without allies may find the room colder. A man with influential kin may walk away lighter. The law has rules, yet reputation moves through those rules like water through reeds. There is no pure system. As the day fades, you hear the hall emptying behind you. Coins clink, boots scrape. Someone mutters about unfairness. Someone else seems pleased. The steward seals or folds the record, preserving the day's quarrels for some future audit of memory and money. Outside, dusk gathers around the thatched roofs. Supper fires begin. The same people who accused one another may soon stand near the same oven, share the same well, kneel under the same church roof, and watch the same fields for frost. That is the strange pressure of medieval justice. It punishes within communities that cannot easily separate. The offender is not always removed. The victim is not always healed. The neighbours must continue seeing one another. So cruelty becomes only one tool among many. Shame, payment, oath, penance, exclusion, and reconciliation all circle the same wound. The system may look rough because the world is rough, but also because everyone knows that tomorrow they may need the very person they condemned today. The bell rings again from the church tower, softer in the evening air. You understand a little more now. Medieval justice is not only the scaffold and blade, it is the field boundary, the ale measure, the missing sheep, the unpaid rent, the whispered insult, the Lord's fee, the king's peace, and the priest's warning. It is a net cast over daily life, and in that net, cruelty waits patiently, not always used, but always understood. The path narrows toward the churchyard, where the ground is slick with dew and the stones seem to remember every footstep. You hear bells from the tower, not loud, but steady enough to guide the town's nerves. Their sound drifts over roofs, animal pens, garden plots, and low doorways. It tells people when to pray, when to gather, when to mark a death, and sometimes when to witness judgment. Here justice enters the realm of signs. A man accused of theft may swear innocence before relics. A woman suspected of poisoning may call upon saints to witness her truth. A neighbour may place his hand on sacred objects and speak an oath that trembles somewhere between law and eternity. Words are not casual things in this world. Spoken falsely, they may endanger the soul. That belief changes everything. You stand near a shallow pit where water gathers darkly beneath the morning sky. The air smells of mud, candle wax, wet grass, and the faint sweetness of crushed herbs near a grave. A priest watches from a little distance. Lay officials speak quietly. The accused waits, pale and silent, while the crowd forms its anxious circle. Trial by ordeal has become one of the most haunting images of medieval justice. In some regions, the accused might carry hot iron, plunge a hand into boiling water, or be lowered into cold water. The wound, burn, or bodily response is then inspected after a set time. To modern eyes, this looks like cruelty pretending to be proof. To medieval eyes, it may look different. Research discussed by legal historians at Harvard and Oxford has treated ordeal as a structured response to uncertainty. The community faces a case without reliable evidence, without modern investigation, and without clear witnesses. Rather than leave suspicion to grow like mould in a locked room, the ordeal creates a sacred test. Was that comforting? Perhaps not, but it gave fear a shape. The mainstream historical fact is simple enough. Ordeals were used in parts of medieval Europe, and their decline accelerated after church authorities withdrew clerical participation in the early 13th century. Once priests could no longer bless the process in the same way, its religious force weakened. A holy test without holy guardians begins to look dangerously bare. The crowd may not phrase it so neatly. They simply feel the change. Before that shift, though, the ritual has weight. The accused may fast, prayers may be spoken, the iron may be heated in a controlled manner, the hand may be bandaged, the seal may be examined later. The whole process depends not merely on pain, but on timing, witnesses, and sacred expectation. It is not random brutality, it is ordered terror. You imagine the iron glowing, not bright like a sword in legend, but dull and dreadful, breathing heat. The room tightens, someone crosses themselves, someone looks away, someone leans forward, because humans are complicated creatures, and even fear can have an audience. The accused reaches out. For one breath, time becomes very small. The body becomes a field where heaven is expected to write. A clean healing may signal innocence. A foul wound may suggest guilt. The logic unsettles you because it turns flesh into testimony. Yet in a world where the divine is thought to intervene constantly, the body is not merely flesh, it is a surface where truth may appear. Modern scholars continue to debate whether ordeals were widely believed to reveal guilt, or whether they sometimes functioned as controlled rituals that allowed officials to avoid impossible decisions. Some researchers have suggested that priests and communities could influence outcomes through preparation, interpretation, or selective use. Others warn against making the system too clever, because sincere belief mattered deeply. That debate remains open, and perhaps it should. Medieval people were not all philosophers, and they were not all fools. Some believed with their whole being, some doubted quietly, some used the rules, some feared them. A legal ritual can contain faith, politics, pressure, and calculation at once. This is the thing about old justice. It rarely has one motive. A quirky tidbit comes from cold water ordeals, where the accused might be bound and placed into water to see whether the body sank or floated. The reasoning was sometimes linked to the idea that pure water might reject the guilty. Later ages mocked this as absurd, and for good reason, since water obeys bodies, ropes, lungs, and panic more reliably than morality. Still, the symbolism is powerful. Water receives or refuses. That image lingers in the mind. A pond becomes a judge. A river becomes a witness. Nature is not scenery anymore. It is called into court and expected to speak. Medieval justice often treats the created world as alive with moral meaning. Stones mark boundaries as relics guard oath. Fire tests flesh. Water reads the soul. The modern mind may smile at this. Then it remembers lie detectors, courtroom gestures, expert rituals, and the little costumes of authority that still persuade us more than we admit. You move closer to the edge of the pit. The water trembles with reflected sky. A fly lands on the surface, circles, and vanishes. Nearby, the accused breathes through parted lips. His family stands behind him, their faces tight with helpless attention. An ordeal does not punish only one person, it punishes everyone attached to him. His wife, his parents, his children, his neighbours, his creditors, his enemies, all wait within the same ring of uncertainty. If he is condemned, property may be lost, reputation may collapse, marriage prospects may darken, old alliances may break. A single body in pain can rearrange an entire community. This is why ordeal has such force. It is not only about truth, it is about closure. A village cannot live forever inside accusation. Suspicion is corrosive. It seeps under doors, clings to meals, poisons wells of trust more effectively than any herb in a whispered story. The ordeal offers a moment when the community can say the matter has passed through fire or water, and now we may move forward. Whether that movement is just is another question. You hear the priest begin a prayer. The words are familiar to those around you, but the atmosphere makes them heavier. There is no shouting. Medieval fear often sounds very quiet. It sounds like cloth shifting, breath-catching, a rope tightening, a child being pulled closer to a mother's skirt. The accused steps forward. The officials watch carefully, not because they are modern scientists, but because ceremony requires precision. A failed ritual threatens authority. If the crowd thinks the ordeal was mishandled, doubt survives. If doubt survives, the whole town remains infected with uncertainty. So even cruelty must be tidy. You can sense the bleak efficiency of it. Pain is being used to create social certainty. Sacred signs are being asked to do what evidence cannot. The ritual allows human beings to say that judgment comes from beyond themselves. Even when human hands prepare the iron, tie the cord, heat the water, and inspect the wound. That is the dark hinge. Responsibility rises toward heaven, while suffering remains on earth. A bird calls from the church roof. The sound is thin, almost rude in its normality. Nearby, someone smells of onions and smoke. Another person has brought a child too young to understand, but old enough to remember the hush. A few days later, perhaps, the bandage is opened. The wound is inspected. Faces gather again. No one breathes easily. The skin may decide life, or rather, those who interpret the skin may decide it. There is always a human eye between sign and sentence, and there, the hidden cruelty sharpens. The ordeal claims to reveal divine truth, but the community still reads the result through expectation, reputation, fear, and desire. A beloved neighbour may be seen mercifully, a disliked stranger may not. The sacred test does not float above society. It sinks deep into it. By evening the churchyard empties, mud holds footprints, the water darkens, a dog noses near the edge and is chased away. The bell no longer rings, yet the sound seems trapped in the air. You leave with the feeling that medieval justice is not only cruel because it hurts bodies, it is cruel because it makes suffering meaningful in ways that are difficult to challenge. Once pain becomes proof, mercy can look like disobedience. Once ritual becomes truth, doubt can look like sin. The sky turns violet over the roofs. Fire, water, oath, relic, wound, and witness all fade into the same gathering dark. And somewhere inside that dark, a frightened community convinces itself that certainty has been found. The market square wakes slowly, as though the stones themselves are reluctant to see what daylight brings. Stalls open beneath sagging awnings. Fish are laid on boards. Wool is shaken out. A baker lifts flat loaves from a covered basket, and the smell rises warm through the cold air. Somewhere, a knife is being sharpened for honest work, though its sound still makes several people glance toward the scaffold. That is the trouble with public justice. It borrows ordinary places. A square used for buying onions can become a theatre of shame by noon. A street where children chase dogs can become a route for condemned bodies. A church bell that usually calls souls to prayer can also gather eyes around punishment. Medieval justice does not separate terror from daily life. It folds terror into the market day, beside bread, cloth, gossip, and the price of hens. You stand where townspeople gather in uneven clusters. Some have come because attendance is expected. Some have come because curiosity has claws. Some have come because the accused harmed them, or someone they love. Others come because public punishment is one of the few spectacles available to people who own very little entertainment and even less control. The crowd is not one creature. It has many hearts. Historians at Oxford and Cambridge have described medieval punishment as a social performance, not merely a legal consequence. That does not mean it was false. It means that justice needed an audience to complete its work. Shame required witnesses. Warning required memory. Authority required bodies standing still and looking up. A punishment hidden away could punish the offender. A punishment in public could instruct everyone else. In many towns, lesser offenders might be placed in the stocks or pillory. These devices held the body in an awkward, exposed position, often at the head, hands, or feet. The pain was real, but the humiliation did much of the work. People could mock, scold, spit, throw rotten food, or simply stare until the offender's name became heavier than before. This was punishment by atmosphere. The smell alone could become part of the sentence. Spoiled vegetables, mud, sweat, stale ale, and the damp wood of the frame all gathered around the trapped body. The offender could not turn away from the faces. Even silence could bruise. Records confirm that public shaming was frequently used for marked offences, sexual misconduct, dishonest trade, and public disorder. Legal historians linked with the University of Pennsylvania have explored how reputation functioned as a kind of social currency in pre-modern communities. To damage it was to damage survival. A modern person might ask why a town would choose humiliation instead of a quiet fine. The medieval answer is simple and not comforting. A fine reaches one purse. Shame reaches every eye. There is a quirky tidbit in some English towns where dishonest sellers could be punished with symbolic objects connected to their trade. A bad brewer might be displayed with poor ale. A seller of false goods might be exposed with the tools of deception. The punishment became almost like a dark little advertisement. The message was clear. Here is the person, here is the trick. Remember both. You hear laughter ripple through the square. It is not always cruel laughter, though often enough it is. Sometimes it is nervous. Sometimes it is communal. Sometimes it is the sound people make when they want to stand safely among the righteous. Public punishment offers a dangerous comfort. It tells the crowd that guilt is over there, fastened in wood, and not here in the watching body. That comfort can become addictive. An open debate among medieval social historians concerns whether crowds mainly reinforced official authority or sometimes reshaped punishment through their reactions. Scholars at Yale and the University of Toronto have noted that crowds could support, mock, resist, or even disrupt executions and shaming rituals. Public justice needed the people, but the people were never entirely controllable. A crowd can bless power. A crowd can also embarrass it. If the punishment seems unfair, murmurs spread. If the condemned speaks well, sympathy may move through the square like a draft under a door. If an official misjudges the mood, the performance can weaken authority instead of strengthening it. Medieval rulers understand this, even when they pretend not to. So ceremonies are managed carefully. Officials choose places of visibility. Clerks record decisions. Priests may attend. Bells may sound. The condemned may be dressed, shaved, bound, marked, or processed in ways that translate guilt into something the crowd can read. Justice becomes a language of posture and objects. The pillory says exposure. The rope says finality. The cart says movement from community to condemnation. The shaved head says disgrace. The written placard says that even those who cannot read should ask what has been written. The town itself becomes a book made of gestures. You notice a woman standing near a stall of herbs. She watches without expression, her basket resting against her hip. Perhaps she knows the offender. Perhaps she has stood there before for someone else. Perhaps she keeps her face still because visible pity can be dangerous when the crowd wants agreement. Conformity has its own weather. It presses on the skin. The accused, fixed in the wooden frame, cannot manage his own image anymore. His body has been borrowed by the town and turned into a warning sign. His discomfort is being spent for public order. His shame becomes a lesson offered to children, apprentices, servants, wives, husbands, traders, and strangers passing through. This is why public punishment feels so invasive. It does not end at the body. It enters conversation. By evening, someone will retell the scene near a hearth. Details will sharpen. A stumble will become cowardice. A cry will become proof. A calm face will become arrogance. Medieval justice continues after the official ritual ends, carried by mouths through lanes and rooms and bedsides. Gossip is not separate from law here. It is one of law's shadows. The sensory power of punishment matters because many people cannot read legal documents. They read bodies instead. They read bruises, posture, scars, clothing, shaved hair, branded skin, and the direction in which someone is led. A community where literacy is limited does not lack communication. It simply communicates through more visible means. The body is a message everyone can understand. There is cruelty in that, but also efficiency. A town without newspapers can make a single punishment travel for years. A child who watches a thief shamed in the square may remember the smell of mud and onions decades later. That memory may do what no statute could do. It may teach fear before temptation even arrives. Still, punishment as theatre risks feeding the appetite it claims to discipline. People who gather to witness shame may become skilled in watching pain. They may learn the gestures of contempt. They may become accustomed to bodies displayed for correction, as though suffering were another market commodity. A spectacle can instruct, it can also harden. The sun rises higher, touching the scaffold steps and the upper walls of nearby houses. Windows open slightly. Faces appear in shadowed frames. A child asks a question and is hushed again. The offender shifts, wrists trapped, neck aching, mouth dry from the stare of the town. Time is part of the punishment. Not dramatic time, but slow time. The hour that stretches, the itch that cannot be scratched, the fly that lands again and again. The sense that every familiar face has become a wall. You feel the square changing around you. At first it was a place of trade. Then it became a place of judgment. Soon it will become a place of trade again. Someone will buy fish near the same spot. Someone will argue over a cloth. Someone will step round a stain without thinking about it. Medieval justice depends on this return to normality. The square must absorb the punishment and keep functioning. That is the point. Disorder appears, authority answers, commerce resumes, the world seems repaired. But is it repaired or merely trained? That question lingers like smoke beneath the awnings. As the offender is released, the crowd loosens. Some drift away. Some remain to stare one last time. A few pretend not to care. The body steps down, but the punishment follows invisibly through every future doorway. People will remember where he stood. They will remember what was thrown. They will remember whether he wept. The square exhales. Above the stalls, bells settle into silence as the day continues, and that is perhaps the most unsettling part. Cruelty has not interrupted ordinary life. It has become one of its instruments. Your eyes adjust to a narrower room, where daylight enters through a slit and falls across a table of rough boards. The air is cooler here. It smells of vinegar, wool, old leather, and the faint iron scent that clings to places where bodies have been examined too closely. A basin waits near the wall. A cloth has been folded with unusual care. Outside, the market sounds continue faintly, softened by stone and distance. Inside, the body becomes the centre of truth. Medieval justice often treats flesh as a page. It reads wounds, marks, swelling, scars, bruises, burns, gestures, breath, and complexion. It listens to cries, silence, trembling, and hesitation. It watches whether a wound bleeds in the presence of a suspect. It asks whether pain proves guilt, whether endurance proves innocence, and whether the dead can still accuse the living. This is a world hungry for visible signs. Modern investigation looks for fingerprints, fibres, blood patterns, documents, digital traces, and chemical evidence. Medieval communities do not have that machinery, yet they still need answers. So they turn to what they can see, touch, smell, and remember. The body, injured or accused, becomes the closest thing to a laboratory. A mainstream fact from medieval legal history confirms this habit. Coroners in medieval England were appointed to investigate sudden, suspicious, or violent deaths, and their roles recorded wounds, weapons, locations, and circumstances. Scholars at the University of London and Cambridge have studied these records as early forms of public death investigation. The process was imperfect, but it was not careless. A dead person could pull officials into motion. You stand beside such an inquiry in your mind. A body has been found near a ditch, stiff with cold, clothing darkened by mud. Neighbours gather at a distance, speaking low. A local official examines the wound, perhaps noting its size, its place, the weapon suspected. A jury of local men may be summoned to say what they know or what they believe happened. They know the landscape, they know the quarrels. They may also know too much. That is the uneasy part. Local knowledge can reveal truth, but it can also carry grudges. The same neighbour who knows who threatened whom may also hate the accused for a boundary dispute, a failed marriage bargain, or a pig that rooted through cabbages last spring. Medieval evidence is often intimate, and intimacy is rarely pure. The corpse does not speak alone. The village speaks through it. One strange tidbit appears in the belief called cruentation, where a corpse was thought to bleed in the presence of the murderer. This idea appears more strongly in later medieval and early modern imagination, but its roots sit inside a much older belief that hidden guilt can disturb the natural order. To modern eyes, it seems like superstition wearing a serious face, yet its emotional logic is clear. The murdered body has been silenced. The community wants it to answer. You can feel why such a belief would comfort the living. If human witnesses fail, perhaps the wound itself will remember. Perhaps the dead will refuse to remain quiet. Perhaps truth is not lost after all, only waiting for the guilty to step close enough. That hope is deeply human. It is also dangerous. Once people believe the body reveals moral truth, any mark can become suspicious. A scar may be interpreted as a sign of violence. A birthmark may become unsettling. Trembling may look like guilt. Calmness may look like hardness. Tears may seem sincere, unless they seem performed. The body cannot win easily when everyone wants it to confess. You turn toward the accused, who stands under watch. His face is pale. Perhaps he's frightened because he is guilty. Perhaps he's frightened because everyone believes he is. In medieval justice, fear itself can be misread. The innocent may shake. The guilty may appear composed, but a crowd often prefers signs that confirm its expectation. The room does not know this. It only watches. An open scholarly debate continues around how medieval courts balanced physical evidence with testimony and reputation. Researchers associated with Harvard's legal history program have emphasized the growing importance of procedure and record-keeping, while other scholars stress that communal memory and moral character still shaped outcomes powerfully. The question is not whether evidence mattered. It is what counted as evidence. That question changes across time and place. In some cases, wounds were carefully described. In others, the accused person's reputation weighed heavily. In still others, confession became central, especially when written procedure expanded in learned courts. But everywhere, the body remained tempting. It seemed honest, it seemed immediate, it seemed unable to lie. Bodies can mislead, of course. A bruise can come from many causes. A wound can be misunderstood. A burn can heal cleanly or badly because of chance, care, infection, or health. A limp can be old. A scar can have nothing to do with a crime. Medieval people often knew this in practical ways, but their legal imagination still craved bodily certainty. You hear the scrape of a stool. A clerk leans forward. Someone asks the accused to show his hands. Perhaps there are scratches. Perhaps not. Hands matter because hands act. They strike, steal, grasp, sign, swear, and plead. In a society of labour, hands are almost biographies. A farmer's palms speak differently from a clerk's fingers. A butcher's knife callus may mean nothing until it means everything. The room studies him. He feels the study. The skin knows when it has become public property. Even standing still becomes difficult when each movement may be interpreted. A swallowed breath, a glance toward the door, a bead of sweat on the upper lip. All may grow larger inside suspicious minds. Medieval justice does not need modern surveillance. It has neighbours. It has eyes in windows, ears near wells, memory at ovens, and judgment waiting beside church doors. The body's watched long before it enters any official room. Who limped home late? Who washed a cloak? Who hid a cut? Who avoided market? Who looked too cheerful after a rival died? Daily life becomes evidence. This constant watching helps explain why physical punishment carries such force. Branding, mutilation, and visible scars mark a person beyond the moment of judgment. They transform the body into a travelling record. A branded thief carries the court into every marketplace. A crop deer may tell a story before the person speaks. The punishment does not end when pain ends. It continues as recognition. This is cruelty stretched across time. A prison sentence has a beginning and end, at least in theory. A mark on the body may follow someone into work, marriage, confession, migration, and burial memory. It may deny the possibility of becoming unknown again. For a world built on reputation, that is severe indeed. Yet physical signs also protect communities in a practical way. A marked offender could be recognized. A repeated crime could be punished more harshly. Authorities lacking modern files used flesh as a record that could not be misplaced, though it could certainly be misread. A cold solution, and a cruel one. You notice the basin near the wall again. Water trembles slightly from footsteps outside. The folded cloth waits, simple and clean. There is something almost tender about the objects, and that tenderness makes the room feel worse. Human beings can arrange neat tools around brutal assumptions. We do this very well. The accused lowers his hands. The official speaks. The clerk writes. The body has been examined, interpreted, and entered into law's memory. Whether truth has been found remains unclear, but the process has created something that looks like truth, and often that is enough to move the machinery onward. Outside, a gust carries in the smell of horses and rain. The town continues breathing, and you understand another layer of medieval cruelty. It is not only that bodies were punished, it is that bodies were asked to prove what minds could not know. Flesh became witness, parchment, warning, confession, and archive. In the dim room, under the thin blade of daylight, justice leans close to the skin and listens for certainty. The doorway into the prison is lower than expected, as though the building wants every person to bow before entering. Stone presses close around you. The air is damp, stale, and heavy with the smell of straw, sweat, old wood, and water that has stood too long in darkness. Somewhere beyond the wall, a chain shifts with a slow metallic complaint. It is not loud. It is worse than loud. It sounds patient. To modern minds, prison is often the punishment itself. A person commits a crime, receives a sentence, and loses years behind walls. But in much of medieval Europe, imprisonment usually works differently. It is often a pause before something else, a holding place before trial, ransom, payment, release, transfer, execution, or forgotten delay. The cell is not always the final answer. It is the waiting room of power. Records from medieval England and France confirm that prisons were commonly used to detain people until legal business could be completed. Scholars at Oxford and the University of California have studied how jails held debtors, accused felons, political prisoners, and people awaiting royal or local judgment. The prison existed, but long-term imprisonment as the ordinary sentence was far less central than it later became. This changes the meaning of the walls. You enter a chamber with no clean boundary between punishment and neglect. Some prisoners sit on straw, some stand because there is not enough dry ground. One man coughs into his sleeve, another stares at nothing, lips moving as if counting debts, prayers, or hours. A woman near the corner holds her cloak close, not for modesty, but for warmth. No one here is merely alone. Each prisoner remains tied to a case, a creditor, a lord, a judge, a sheriff, a family, a fee. The walls do not cut away society, they press society inward. Money can decide who eats better, who gets light, who can send messages, who receives visitors, and who waits in filth. Even captivity has a price list. That is one of the darker surprises. In many medieval prisons, inmates might be charged for food, bedding, chains, release documents, or other necessities. Jailers often made income through fees, and abuse could flourish in the shadow between official duty and private profit. A cell could become less like a state facility, and more like a business with locked doors. A grim little enterprise, and yes, very medieval. The quirky tidbit is that some prisoners with money could arrange surprisingly tolerable conditions. They might receive better meals, private rooms, writing materials, or visits. Certain noble captives were held in relative comfort, especially if they were valuable for ransom. A highborn prisoner could dine while a poor debtor shivered nearby. The same wall holds different worlds. You can feel that inequality in the darkness. Near the entrance, where air moves more freely, someone with connections may sleep on a pallet. Deeper inside, where the stone sweats and straw rots quickly, poorer prisoners breathe the sour air of bodies packed together. Medieval justice does not simply punish guilt, it often sorts suffering by status. The poor meet the wall more directly. There is an open debate among legal historians about whether medieval imprisonment should be understood mainly as custodial administration or as punishment in practice. Researchers connected with Yale studies of legal institutions have noted that even when imprisonment was meant as temporary detention, the experience itself could be harsh enough to become punishment. Other scholars emphasize that contemporaries often thought of fines, shame, exile, mutilation, or death as the true penalties. Both views stand in the same cell, a person held for months before trial is suffered, whatever the official language says. Hunger does not care whether it is called sentence or delay. Fever does not wait for legal precision. Fear does not ask whether the clerk intended it as punishment. The body keeps its own records. You hear water dripping somewhere behind you. It falls at irregular intervals, refusing to become a rhythm. Rats move in the straw with the discreet confidence of creatures that understand human systems very well. A prisoner lifts his head at the sound of footsteps, because every arrival could mean news, food, questioning, payment, transfer, or doom. Uncertainty becomes a second chain. In a world without swift communication, delay can swallow people. A sheriff may be slow. A court session may not arrive soon. Witnesses may be absent. A fee may be unpaid. A powerful enemy may prefer that a person remain conveniently inside stone. The prison does not need to be designed as torture to become terrifying. It only needs damp walls and time. Time does the rest. Medieval towns and castles contain many kinds of confinement. A gatehouse chamber may hold offenders. A castle tower may hold hostages. A bishop's prison may hold clerics or religious offenders. A debtor may be detained until payment appears. A political captive may be kept alive because a living body can be negotiated. Captivity is not one thing. It is a tool with many handles, A king may use prison to pressure a rebel's family. A lord may use it to secure a ransom. A town may use it to hold a thief until judgment. A church authority may use confinement as correction, demanding repentance rather than immediate destruction. In each case, the locked room says the same thing in different accents. You are not free to disappear. That matters in a mobile world. People can flee. They can hide in kin networks, forests, towns, ports, monasteries, or borderlands. Holding the accused body becomes essential when the state lacks modern tracking systems. Medieval law often needs custody because it cannot rely on passports, police databases, or photographs. To possess the body is to possess the case. The body in the cell is evidence, asset, warning, and leverage. You move along the wall and touch the stone. It's cold enough to sting. Moss darkens the lower cracks, and the mortar feels crumbly beneath your fingers. A thin line of light falls from above, catching dust and breath. The prison does not feel like a place built for reform. It feels like a throat that has learned to hold people without swallowing them immediately. Reform is not absent from medieval thought, but it is not the main architecture here. Monastic confinement may include penitential ideas. Church discipline may imagine correction of the soul. Some urban authorities may prefer containment over bloodshed. Yet the broad modern dream of prison as moral rehabilitation belongs largely to later developments. Here, the locked door has simpler purposes. Hold, pressure, extract, await. The cruelty comes partly from that simplicity. A prisoner's suffering can become incidental, almost administratively invisible. If the goal is only to keep him available, then his hunger, sickness, fear, and humiliation may seem secondary. The system looks past pain because pain is not always the official point. That can be more chilling than declared brutality. Outside the cell, a jailer speaks with someone at the threshold. Coins change hands. A message may pass. A loaf may be delivered. A name may be called. Everyone listens. The prison teaches attention. It trains ears to notice keys, footsteps, voices, weather, carts, bells, and silences. A key in a lock is never just a sound. For one person, it may mean release. For another, questioning. For another, the last walk into daylight. The same iron music carries several possible futures, and each prisoner hears the version most suited to his fear. You begin to understand why medieval justice can be cruel without constant spectacle. Public punishment wounds under the sky, but imprisonment wounds in hidden hours. It does not need a crowd. It has darkness. It has delay. It has fees. It has the slow erosion of dignity while a case waits for someone else's convenience. The cell narrows around the mason. A man near the wall whispers a prayer. Another counts marks scratched into wood. Someone laughs softly, perhaps at a memory, perhaps at nothing. The smell of damp straw grows stronger as evening settles into the building. Above, the town continues with bread, bells, trade, quarrels, and lamps being lit. Justice has placed people beneath ordinary life. And there, in the cold patience of stone, you see another answer to why it was so cruel. Not every cruelty required a blade or crowd. Some cruelty was made of waiting, payment, darkness, and the quiet fact that freedom could depend on money no prisoner had. The castle rises above the road like a thought made from stone, cold, expensive, and not especially interested in being loved. You approach through a landscape of fields, ditches, scattered huts, and bare trees bending under a pale sky. The track is uneven beneath your feet. Mud grips the soles of your shoes. Far off, cattle move like dark smudges against the grass, while smoke slips from village roofs in slow, tired ribbons. Everything here points upward. The tower, the wall, the Lord's Hall, the chapel roof inside the enclosure. Even the path seems to climb toward authority, as though justice itself lives higher than ordinary hunger. That is not an accident. Medieval power understands height. It understands gates, walls, banners, horns, watchmen, and the unease produced by being looked down upon. A castle is not only a military building, it is a legal statement. It says that force has a residence. In the feudal world, justice is often tied to land and lordship. A lord may hold courts, collect fines, demand service, punish tenants, settle disputes, and defend privileges. The right to judge is part of the right to rule. It proves that lordship is not merely ownership of soil, but command over human behaviour. Land feeds power, power judges land. Studies of medieval lordship at institutions such as Princeton and Oxford have long emphasised that castles were centres of administration, as well as defence, charters, account rolls, court records, and estate documents reveal that justice was woven into rent, labour, inheritance, and military obligation. A lord's court was not ornamental. It helped make lordship real. You pass beneath the gatehouse and feel the temperature drop. Stone collects cold. It smells of wet mortar, horse sweat, leather straps, and smoke trapped under timber roofs. A guard glances at you without curiosity, which feels somehow worse than suspicion. Inside, the yard is busy. Servants carry buckets. A boy leads a mule. A woman shakes out a cloth near the kitchen. Power is rarely still, it has chores. Within the hall, a lord may hear disputes among tenants, or more often, a steward may do so in his name. The bench, the cup, the seal, the armed men near the wall, each item says the same thing. Authority is present even when justice sounds like paperwork. A fine for missed labour may seem small, but it confirms obedience. A broken duty is never merely practical here, it is symbolic. If a tenant refuses service, if a villain runs away, if a village resists rent, if a knight neglects obligation, the lord's position is touched. The matter can become dangerous because hierarchy depends on repetition. Every harvest, every payment, every bow, every attendance at court renews the order. Refusal creates a crack others might notice, so punishment must often be visible enough to seal the crack. This is why rebellion receives such harsh answers. A theft may disturb property. A revolt disturbs the story that keeps property secure. When peasants rise, when towns defy lords, when retainers betray a master, punishment becomes more than correction. It becomes restoration of the image of command. The castle must look unshaken. That need can produce ferocity. You hear boots on a wooden stair. Above, a chamber holds records. Below, a storage room holds grain. Nearby, a prison chamber may hold a man whose family is negotiating his release. The castle gathers food, documents, weapons, bodies, and fear under one roofed system. It is almost like a stone stomach, digesting the countryside. A strange little tidbit from medieval lordship concerns the right of gallows. In some regions, a lord's authority could be marked by visible execution structures, sometimes placed where travellers could see them. The gallows was not simply a device for death. It was a boundary sign, a vertical reminder that this territory had a judge with teeth. A landscape could be branded by punishment. You imagine a road entering a lordship with fields opening on either side and a dark wooden frame standing beyond the ditch. Birds perch on it. Wind moves through it. Children grow up knowing it as part of the horizon. The message requires no speech. This land is watched. The cruelty of feudal justice comes partly from the closeness between personal power and legal order. A lord offended by disobedience may also be the figure who profits from fines. A steward may protect his master's income while claiming to enforce custom. Tenants may appeal to inherited rights. But those rights must be spoken inside rooms controlled by the very power they limit. That is a difficult room in which to be brave. Yet feudal justice is not simply arbitrary violence. This is where the story becomes less convenient. Custom matters. Community memory matters. Peasants may know exactly what services are owed and what services are not. They may challenge excessive demands. They may use courts to protect holdings, inheritance, and grazing rights. They may grumble with impressive legal precision. Medieval villagers are not mute cattle. An open scholarly debate remains over how far custom restrained lordly cruelty in practice. Some historians associated with Stanford's work on medieval society stress negotiation and mutual dependence. Others point to coercion, status inequality, and the lord's ability to turn procedure into pressure. The balance shifts by region, period, personality, and crisis. A hungry lord is worse than a comfortable one. A weak lord may be more violent than a secure lord, because fear of losing authority can sharpen punishment. A newly arrived lord may enforce rights more aggressively than one whose family has long relied on careful compromise. After war, famine, or plague, the struggle over labour and rent can make justice feel like a weapon polished daily. The law speaks in calm words. Behind it, stomachs growl. You stand near the high table while a dispute is heard. A tenant is accused of failing to perform labour during harvest. He claims illness. Another says he was seen drinking near the mill. The room listens. The steward asks who will pledge for him. That question matters. A person's social bonds can soften judgment or expose isolation. No one survives alone under lordship. Kin, neighbours, pledges, patrons, and parish ties form a net. If the net holds, a person may pay, apologise, or negotiate. If it breaks, the Lord's hand feels much heavier. Justice becomes cruelest where social protection thins. This is especially true for those without strong backing: a migrant labourer, a widow without adult sons, a poor tenant, a suspected runaway, a disliked servant. Each may face the system without enough voices around them. The castle hears better when many people speak for you. Silence can be expensive. Beyond the hall, the bailey smells of dung, cut wood, onions, and hot grease from the kitchen. The sensory world feels ordinary enough to be disarming. A child chases a chicken near a wall built to resist armies. A cook curses over spilled broth beside a prison door. A clerk carries accounts past spear racks. The machinery of command is domestic as well as violent. That mixture makes feudal justice unsettling. It grows not only from cruelty, but from household order. The same lord who punishes may sponsor a feast, repair a bridge, endow a chapel, arrange a marriage, protect a village during a raid, or exploit the same villagers during a shortage. Power rarely presents itself as one thing. It is shelter with a locked gate. It is bread with a bill attached. A lord who fails to punish may appear weak. A lord who punishes too harshly may breed hatred. So justice becomes a performance of balance, though the scales are never equal. The tenants watch the lord, just as the lord watches them. Everyone measures what can be demanded, resisted, forgiven, or remembered. Memory moves quietly through the fields. A harsh fine today may return as sabotage tomorrow. A humiliating punishment may become a song, a curse, or a story told in low voices while repairing tools. Castles look permanent, but they stand in landscapes full of people who notice everything. This does not make the world gentle, it makes it tense. As dusk gathers, the castle walls turn purple-grey. Torches appear near the gate. Somewhere inside, a servant bolts a door with a thick iron bar. The sound travels through the yard, final and heavy. Outside the walls, the village fires glow lower to the ground, softer but no less watchful. You understand why justice tied to lordship could become cruel. It had to protect property, hierarchy, reputation, income, and obedience all at once. A sentence might answer a crime. but it also defended a social structure built from unequal dependence. The accused tenant leaves the hall with a fine, or a warning, or a punishment worse than either. The steward records the matter. The Lord's authority has been rehearsed for another day. The fields wait under darkness, ready to demand labour again at first light. Above them, the castle keeps its shape against the sky. It does not need to shout. Stone has its own voice. The church door opens inward, and the smell changes at once. Outside, the road carries mud, horses, cabbage leaves, and the tired breath of market life. Inside, the air is cooler, darker, and touched with wax smoke, damp stone, old wood, and something faintly floral from herbs crushed underfoot. Your steps soften on the floor. Even the smallest sound seems to ask permission before rising. Here, justice enters more quietly. It does not always arrive with chains, gallows, or shouted orders. It may arrive as a question asked beside an altar. It may arrive as a whispered confession. It may arrive as a summons to answer for marriage, oath-breaking, defamation, clerical misconduct, or sexual behaviour. The crime may be legal, but it may also be spiritual. The soul becomes a courtroom. Church courts across medieval Europe handled many matters that modern people might place under private life. Family law, or moral discipline, marriage disputes, legitimacy, wills, clerical behaviour, tithes, oaths, and accusations of sin could all come under ecclesiastical authority. Scholars at Yale and Notre Dame have studied how these courts created a second legal world, one shaped by canon law and pastoral concern. That phrase sounds gentle. Pastoral concern can still frighten. You sit in the dim nave, where painted saints look down from walls fading under smoke and age. Their faces are calm in a way no living face can manage. Near the chancel, a priest speaks with a man accused of breaking an oath. The words are measured. No blade is visible. Yet the pressure in the space is heavy enough to make breathing feel formal. An oath is not merely a promise here. It is a bridge between human speech and divine witness. To break it is not only to deceive another person, but to stain the order that holds community together. Modern life is full of casual promises. Medieval life gives words a sharper edge. A false oath can wound heaven. This is why church justice can feel both softer and deeper than secular punishment. It may prefer penance over blood. It may order pilgrimage, fasting, public apology, payment, separation from forbidden relationships, or exclusion from sacraments. But it reaches inward. It says guilt is not only what you did, it is what you are carrying unseen. That can be a tender idea. It can also become a cage. A mainstream fact stands firmly here. The medieval church developed a sophisticated body of canon law, especially after collections such as Gratian's Decretum shaped legal teaching in the 12th century. Universities, including Bologna and later Oxford, trained clerics in this learned law. Ecclesiastical justice was not merely superstition in robes. It was educated, procedural, and highly influential. The books mattered. The robes mattered too. You notice a clerk seated with parchment, recording testimony. Church court procedure could be careful, written, and technical. Witnesses might be examined. Documents might be considered. Legal specialists might argue. This is not the smoky chaos of legend. It is a system that believes order can be written into moral life. Still, moral life resists neat columns. A woman claims a marriage promise was made. A man denies it. Witnesses recall words spoken in a doorway, a field, a bedchamber, or near a feast. In a world where consent and spoken vows can create binding marriage, memory becomes powerful. The church must decide whether private speech has made a public bond. That is no small matter. Marriage shapes inheritance, legitimacy, property, sex, household authority, and reputation. A whispered promise can become a legal storm. The church court listens for truth in statements that may be tangled with shame, desire, pressure, pregnancy, greed, and fear. The human heart is a terrible witness, but often the only one available. A quirky tidbit appears in records where couples were punished for marrying secretly, even when the marriage itself might be considered valid. The church wanted consent, but it also wanted order, publicity, and oversight. Apparently, even medieval romance needed paperwork. Some things never truly leave us. The gentle sarcasm writes itself, yet beneath the oddity lies a serious concern. Secret unions could create disputes over legitimacy and inheritance. They could leave women vulnerable if men denied promises. They could disrupt family arrangements. Church law tried to protect consent, while also containing the chaos consent might unleash. Justice here is not simple kindness. It is moral administration. An open scholarly debate continues over whether church courts empowered ordinary people, especially women, by allowing them to bring claims about marriage and reputation, or whether they disciplined bodies and desires under clerical control. Researchers from Cambridge and Princeton have argued different sides of this tension. Both possibilities breathe inside the records. A woman abandoned after a promise might use the court as a weapon of survival. Another woman accused of sexual misconduct might experience the same court as exposure and shame. The institution is not one thing. It is a door that opens differently depending on who enters, who speaks, and who has support. You hear rain begin outside, tapping softly against the roof and stone sill. The sound deepens the stillness. A priest asks a question about intention. Intention is a dangerous word. It reaches past action into motive, past motive into conscience, and past conscience into fear of judgment beyond death. Medieval justice does not end at the grave. That belief changes the scale of every sentence. A fine may hurt the purse. A whipping may hurt the flesh. But excommunication threatens social and spiritual isolation. To be cut from sacraments can mean being cut from the rhythm by which a community understands life, death, forgiveness, and belonging. It is a punishment of absence. No shared table of grace. No easy burial comfort. No ordinary place in sacred time. Modern readers may underestimate this because they often imagine belief as private opinion. In the medieval parish, belief is environment. It surrounds birth, harvest, marriage, sickness, bells, burial, and the terrifying uncertainty of the soul. To be excluded is to lose air. Yet the church also offers sanctuary and mercy in forms that complicate the picture. A fugitive might flee to a church and claim temporary protection. A sinner might confess and perform penance. A harsh secular judgment could sometimes be softened by clerical intervention. The same institution that disciplines may also shield. A church door can be both threshold and refuge. The stone around you seems to hold that contradiction. Near one pillar, a painted martyr suffers beautifully. Near another, an old woman lights a candle for a dead child. At the altar, law speaks in careful Latin learning, though the villagers understand its effects in bread, marriage, shame, inheritance, and burial. Justice becomes sacred texture. It is woven into the smell of wax, the calendar of fasts, the ringing of bells, the fear of dying unshriven, and the longing to be forgiven before night falls. A person can survive a lord's anger and still fear the priest's refusal. A public apology before the parish may cut deeper than a fine, because everyone hears it, because everyone remembers. The cruelty of church justice lies not usually in spectacular violence, but in interior reach. It trains people to examine themselves under invisible eyes. It turns desire into testimony, rumour into moral danger, and private conduct into communal concern. It tells the sinner that the world has witnesses beyond the human crowd. Perhaps that is comforting. Perhaps it is unbearable. A man accused of defamation stands near the door, asked to repeat or retract words he spoke against a neighbour. Words again. Always words. In a small community, an insult can damage marriage prospect, our credit, employment, and safety. The church may order public correction because speech has public consequences. Reputation, once cracked, lets cold air into every part of life. So the offender must repair what he damaged. He may stand where others can hear him. He may admit falsehood. He may perform penance in a garment that marks him out. The punishment is spiritual, but its theatre is social. Shame kneels beside forgiveness, and neither seems fully comfortable with the other. The rain grows stronger. Water slides down the outside wall, darkening the stone. Inside, candle flames bend slightly in a draught. The priest closes a book. The cleric dries the ink. The accused lowers his eyes, perhaps relieved, perhaps humiliated, perhaps already calculating what the village will say. That is the final difficulty. Church justice promises healing of the soul, but it works through communities full of memory. A penitent may be forgiven by God, yet still watched by neighbours. The sacrament may cleanse, but gossip dries slowly. The bells begin again, softer under rain. You remain in the cool nave, surrounded by painted faces and the heavy sweetness of wax. In this quiet place, cruelty wears a different garment. It does not always seize the body. It enters through conscience, reputation, fear of exclusion, and the hope that confession can make a broken life whole again. The door opens, wet air moves inside, and for a moment, sin and law seem to breathe together in the dark. The lane beyond the church bends toward the poorer edge of town, where walls lean closer and smoke hangs lower. Here, the ground is softer beneath your feet. Rainwater gathers in black hollows, reflecting strips of grey sky. A cat slips under a broken fence. Laundry hangs limp between upper windows. The air smells of boiled onions, wet wool, tallow smoke, and the sour edge of poverty that no one names politely. Justice feels different here. It has less patience. You notice the houses first. They are smaller, darker, patched more often. A widow lives behind one door. A foreign trader rents a room near another. A woman known for sharp speech passes with a basket of roots and linen. A disabled beggar sits under an overhang, watching feet rather than faces. A child stares from a window with the careful stillness of someone already learning suspicion. These are the lives nearest accusation. Medieval justice does not fall evenly across society. Rank, wealth, gender, age, occupation, birthplace, religion, and reputation shape how a person is heard. Some people enter court surrounded by kin and credibility. Others enter already half condemned by rumour. The law may speak of order, but order often begins by distrusting the vulnerable. That is not unusual in human history. It is painfully ordinary. Records from medieval courts confirm that women appeared frequently in cases involving brewing, scolding, debt, sexual conduct, defamation, theft, and household disputes. Scholars at the University of Wisconsin and Oxford have studied how women used courts while also facing sharp limits within them. They were not absent from legal life. They were deeply present, but not equally protected. That double truth matters. A woman might bring a claim for slander, unpaid debt, assault, broken marriage promise, or stolen goods. She might testify, negotiate, and defend property. Yet the same community could also interpret her speech as disorder, her sexuality as danger, her poverty as suspicion, and her independence as arrogance. Law gave tools, then placed thorns around the handle. You pass a doorway where two women are arguing in low voices. Their words are quick, controlled, and filled with old injuries. In a small town, speech can injure almost as powerfully as a fist. Accusations of theft, sexual misconduct, bad trade, or moral corruption could follow someone through market, marriage, and burial memory. Reputation is bread. Without it, a person hungers. One medieval punishment associated with disorderly or slanderous speech was public shaming, sometimes through devices meant to expose the offender to ridicule. The famous scold's bridle belongs more clearly to later periods than the High Middle Ages, but the larger pattern of punishing speech and reputation has older roots. Communities feared words because words could loosen trust, and trust was already thin. A quirky tidbit appears in records and local traditions about punishments aimed at noisy quarrels, especially among people accused of disturbing neighbourhood peace. Some towns use symbolic humiliation, public correction, or forced apologies to quiet reputational storms. Apparently, medieval officials also discovered that nothing destroys civic order quite like neighbours with unlimited opinions. It is almost comforting. Almost. The darker edge lies in who was called disruptive. A man's anger might be treated as authority, while a woman's anger might be treated as disorder. A wealthy person's insult might be considered unfortunate. A poor person's insult might become a legal problem. The same voice sounds different when it rises from different social positions. Justice has ears, but they are not neutral. An open scholarly debate continues over how far medieval women's legal participation should be seen as agency or surveillance. Researchers at Harvard and Cambridge have explored how women brought cases and defended interests, while other historians stress that courts also regulated female labour, sexuality, and speech. The evidence refuses to sit neatly on one side. You can feel that refusal in the lane. A widow accused of theft may be guilty. She may also be hungry. A young servant accused of sexual misconduct may have acted freely, or she may have had almost no freedom at all. A healer accused of harmful magic may be dangerous, unlucky, skilled, disliked, or merely standing too close to someone else's tragedy. Medieval justice often dislikes ambiguity. Poor people live inside it. The scent of herbs drifts from one doorway. Rosemary, rue, garlic, sage, crushed leaves drying near the hearth. Healing knowledge often belongs to women, monks, barber surgeons, midwives, and local practitioners. Much of it is practical. Some of it is ritual. Some of it sits in that broad old borderland where medicine, prayer, charm, and habit blur together. People go where relief seems possible. Then, when relief fails, suspicion looks for a face. A child dies. A cow sickens. A man wastes away after a quarrel. A harvest rots in the field. In a world with limited medical knowledge and constant vulnerability, misfortune seeks explanation. Sometimes it finds bad air, sin, weather, divine testing, or human malice. Sometimes it finds the person already disliked. Accusation often follows the path of least resistance. This is especially true for outsiders. Foreign merchants, travellers, migrants, Jews, lepers, Roma communities in later medieval Europe, and other marginal groups could become targets when fear needed a body. Medieval Christendom contained trade, travel, and cultural exchange, but it also carried intense suspicion toward those who did not fit local patterns. Difference was visible. Visibility could be dangerous. A mainstream historical fact must be spoken carefully. Jewish communities in medieval Europe faced legal restrictions, expulsions, forced conversions, violence, and accusations that reflected religious hostility and political exploitation. Scholars at Columbia and Princeton have examined how rulers both protected and exploited Jewish minorities, often using them as financial instruments before abandoning them under pressure. This is justice turning predatory. When a minority depends on royal protection, that protection can become a cage with a gilded lock, A ruler may defend a community when useful, tax it heavily, borrow from it, restrict it, or sacrifice it during crisis. Courts may offer procedure, but prejudice can enter the room before testimony begins. The law does not need to shout hatred. Sometimes it simply writes it. You hear footsteps behind you and turn toward a small group gathering near a doorway. A rumour has moved faster than fact. Someone says a purse is missing. Someone else mentions the foreign labourer who came through yesterday. Another remembers that the widow needed money. Another says the quiet girl from the baker's house was seen near the stall. Each sentence narrows the world. No one has yet proved anything, but already suspicion arranges people by convenience. The stranger is easy to imagine guilty because few will defend him. The widow is easy because poverty looks like motive. The servant is easy because servants move through rooms without owning them. This is how accusation becomes cruel before judgment. It begins as story. Medieval courts often relied on presentment, reputation, and communal knowledge. Such tools could be sensible in communities where everyone knew one another. They could also turn social dislike into legal peril. A person with a bad name entered the process already burdened. A person with no name, no kin, and no sure place could be worse off still. A good reputation was armour. Not everyone could afford it. You pass a water trough where two girls fill buckets. They lower their voices as an older woman approaches. Perhaps she's been accused before. Perhaps she only lives alone. Perhaps she owns a black cat, which is apparently enough for later storytellers to build a whole career. People enjoy giving fear a costume. The medieval world is not one long witch hunt. Despite popular imagination, large-scale witch prosecutions belong mainly to later centuries. Yet anxieties about harmful magic, curses, charms, and hidden malice are present in medieval communities. Church and secular authorities varied in how they treated such fears. The boundary between sin and crime shifts. So does the boundary between healer and suspect. The woman with the basket continues walking. Her shoes make soft sounds in mud. She does not look at the girls. That may mean dignity. It may mean exhaustion. It may mean she knows that any expression can be misread. Marginal people learn the art of controlled faces. Safety can require dullness. The cruelty of medieval justice toward outsiders and vulnerable people is not always found in spectacular punishment. It is found in unequal credibility. Who is believed first? Who must prove innocence harder? Who is described as troublesome? Who is imagined as naturally dishonest, lustful, greedy, foreign, cursed, or unclean? A system can wound through assumptions. No instrument required. As evening lowers, the poorer lane fills with smoke from cooking fires. A dog barks twice, then stops. Somewhere a baby cries with that thin, urgent sound which makes every adult body listen. The town wall rises in the distance, meant to protect all inside it, though protection is never shared evenly. The widow closes her shutter. The trader counts coins quietly. The healer ties her herbs in bundles. The servant carries water up a stair. Each life continues under the gaze of possible accusation. Each person knows that justice may arrive not only from crime, but from rumour sharpened by fear. You stand in the lane as the sky darkens. The stones hold the day's dampness. The windows glow weakly. Somewhere, someone repeats a story with one detail changed, and that change may matter more than anyone understands. Here, cruelty grows not from law alone, but from the human need to place blame where resistance is weakest. And in the hush between one whispered name and the next, you hear how dangerous it is to be seen as less than fully protected. The chamber of questioning is not large, and that is part of its power. A narrow window lets in a colourless strip of afternoon. Dust moves within it, drifting slowly as though even the air has become cautious. The walls are thick. The door is heavier than it needs to be. A table stands in the centre, plain, scarred, and old enough to have heard too many voices change their shape. You notice the quiet first. No crowd presses at the threshold. No market bell calls observers. No public laughter breaks the tension. This is justice turned inward, away from the square and into the room where answers are expected to emerge from pressure. The cruelty here does not need spectacle. It has procedure. A clerk waits with parchment. An official asks the first question. Medieval torture is often misunderstood, sometimes exaggerated into fantasy, sometimes softened into abstraction. The reality is narrower, colder, and more legalistic. It was not used everywhere in the same way, and it was not always permitted in every court. Yet where learned Roman canon procedure influenced criminal investigation, torture could be treated as a tool for extracting confession under controlled conditions. That phrase as controlled conditions is almost worse than rage. It suggests that cruelty has learned to sit upright. A mainstream historical fact stands at the centre. In many medieval and early modern legal systems influenced by Roman law, confession was considered a powerful form of proof, but torture usually required prior indications of guilt. Scholars at the University of Chicago and Harvard have studied how learned jurists debated rules, limits, and evidentiary thresholds. The theory was not that anyone could be tortured at random, though reality could become darker. Rules can restrain violence. Rules can also dress it properly. The official asks where the stolen silver was hidden, or who joined the conspiracy, or whether the accused made a forbidden oath. The accused answers. The answer is not enough. A second question comes, then a third. The room begins to tighten around repetition. The mind grows tired before the body is touched. Interrogation is weather. It grows humid with fear. The medieval pursuit of confession rests on a belief that truth should become spoken truth. A crime secretly committed remains incomplete in the legal imagination until the offender acknowledges it. Confession promises clarity. It promises moral order. It seems to join the inner person with the outer act. That promise can be seductive. It can also be disastrous. When a system overvalues confession, it creates a terrible incentive to force one. The confession may comfort judges, satisfy communities, justify punishment, and appear in records as clean certainty. Yet pain does not reliably reveal truth. Pain reveals desperation, confusion, compliance, endurance, collapse, and sometimes whatever words might make the suffering stop. The body can speak falsely to survive. Medieval jurists were not always blind to this danger. Some legal writers warned that torture could produce lies. Some required corroboration. Some insisted that a confession made under torture should be repeated freely afterward. But the word freely becomes fragile when the memory of pain is still inside the room. Freedom has echoes. The accused may repeat what officials want because refusal could reopen the door to suffering. A statement made after coercion may look calm on parchment. The skin remembers differently. The clerk records words without recording the terror clinging to them. Ink can make fair look orderly. A quirky tidbit appears in the legal obsession with procedure. In some places, officials carefully recorded whether torture had been authorized, how questioning occurred, and whether confession was later confirmed. It is grimly bureaucratic. Apparently, even cruelty wanted minutes, forms, and proper sequence, because nothing says moral confidence like paperwork besides suffering. The sarcasm is gentle. The unease is not. You look at the tools in the chamber, though imagination should not linger too eagerly. There may be ropes, weights, benches, bindings, or devices meant to strain the body rather than kill it. The goal, legally speaking, is not immediate destruction. The goal is speech. The body is pressured so the mouth will open in the desired way. That makes the cruelty strangely instrumental. Pain becomes a key. The open scholarly debate here is important. Researchers at Princeton, Yale, and Oxford have argued over how often torture was used in medieval criminal justice. and whether its importance has been magnified by later imagination. Some historians emphasize that many local courts relied more on fines, oaths, witnesses, and reputation. Others point to learned courts, inquisitorial procedure, and state formation as crucial settings where coercive interrogation gained force. The truth varies by region and century. It is not one dark blanket over all Europe. Still, where torture enters law, something profound changes. The judge no longer waits only for witnesses or divine signs. He actively produces testimony from the accused. The process becomes investigative in a more aggressive sense. The hidden interior of the suspect is treated like a locked chest that authority may break open. This is not merely punishment. It is invasion. You feel the room's closeness around your shoulders. The accused is seated or bound. A drop of sweat runs down his temple. He hears every sound too clearly. The scrape of a stool, the clerk's breath, the official's shifting weight, the faint creak of rope. Fear makes small noises enormous. Then comes the question again. Names are requested, accomplices are demanded, motive is sought, objects must be located. Confession has a hunger that rarely ends with one sentence. Once a person speaks, the system may ask for more details, more names, more hidden acts, more patterns that make the case feel complete. Pain can create stories. That is one reason torture spreads danger beyond the body under pressure. An accused person may name others. Those names may lead to new interrogations. Fear branches. A single chamber can become the root of a wider panic, especially in cases involving conspiracy, heresy, treason, or imagined secret groups. The legal appetite for hidden networks is ancient. It has never gone entirely away. The accused might offer a true confession. That possibility must be allowed. People do commit terrible acts. Medieval communities faced real violence, theft, betrayal, arson, and murder. Officials were not always inventing danger from mist. But a true confession under torture does not make the method wise. It only makes the moral knot tighter. A cruel tool may sometimes find truth. That does not cleanse the tool. The chamber holds this contradiction like cold water in a basin. Officials may believe they are protecting society. They may believe law requires sternness. They may fear letting guilty people escape. They may fear divine judgment if heresy or treason spreads through their weakness. Fear can make educated people precise and merciless. Cruelty often speaks in the voice of responsibility. This is one of the darkest lessons in medieval justice. It is not always the ignorant mob that hurts bodies. Sometimes it is the trained mind, the careful clerk, the learned judge, the official who knows the rules and believes the rules make violence legitimate. Knowledge does not automatically soften power. Sometimes it sharpens the blade by measuring it. A candle burns on the table, though daylight has not fully died. Wax leans down the side in slow folds. The accused's voice changes. It may grow hoarse, flat, desperate, or strangely calm. The official listens for consistency. The clerk writes what can be written. The rest remains in the air, unrecorded. What does terror sound like on parchment? Usually it sounds like a sentence. A confession appears neat once copied. It has grammar. It has sequence. It may even have a crossmark or seal. Future readers may see only the order of words. They must imagine the room, the heat, the pressure, the thirst, the shame, the human desire for suffering to end. Documents can hide the body that produced them. At last the questioning pauses. The door opens, cooler air enters, carrying distant smells of rain, horses, and cooking fires. The town outside continues, unaware or pretending to be. Somewhere a bell rings for prayer. Somewhere bread is being cut. Somewhere a child is learning letters by candlelight. The accused remains inside the memory of the room, You step back from the table and understand why forced confession became one of the cruelest instruments of medieval justice. It promised truth while risking falsehood. It claimed order while spreading fear. It treated the suffering body as a path towards certainty, then asked the world to trust the words that pain had shaped. The chamber darkens. The clerk sands the ink. And the question that remains is not only what the accused confessed, but what kind of society feels safer once a frightened mouth has spoken. The scaffold stands where everyone can see it, raised above the square like a dark answer to an old question. Morning gathers slowly over the roofs. Mist clings to the lower streets. The cobbles shine with last night's rain, and carts leave wet tracks between puddles. A butcher opens his shutters with ordinary effort. A woman carries a basket of eggs past the watching crowd. The town is preparing for death with the movements of daily life. That is what unsettles you first. Nothing stops completely. The scaffold is not hidden behind a wall. It is placed in the open, near market space, gate, bridge, or road, where bodies and messages travel. Execution in the medieval world is not only removal of the condemned, it is ceremony, it is warning, it is theatre. It is a claim that broken order can be repaired through visible finality. The crowd arrives in layers. Apprentices first, restless and whispering. Traders with hands tucked into sleeves. Older women who have seen enough to know where to stand. Children pulled close by parents who insist this is a lesson, though perhaps they are not entirely sure what lesson it teaches. The air smells of damp wool, horse breath, smoke, and stale ale. Someone sells food nearby. Human beings are very strange. A mainstream historical fact is clear across many medieval regions. Executions were public because punishment was expected to communicate authority, deterrence, and moral restoration. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Michigan have studied capital punishment as a civic ritual, especially in towns where law depended heavily on spectacle and collective memory. The death itself mattered, but the meaning around it mattered too. The condemned does not simply die. The condemned is displayed as an argument. The officials arrive in formal order: a guard, a clerk, a priest, perhaps a sheriff or town officer, perhaps armed men to keep the crowd from pressing too close. Clothing, position, and sequence transform, killing into procedure. A death carried out by law must not look like murder, even though both leave a body behind. That distinction must be performed carefully. The condemned may be allowed prayers, he may be urged to confess, he may be expected to forgive and ask forgiveness. His final words matter because they can confirm the justice of the sentence. A calm confession helps the crowd believe the world has been balanced. A defiant speech can disturb the entire design, so even the last breath is managed. You watch him climb the steps. The wood is damp beneath his shoes. It creaks, and the crowd hears it. That little sound enters memory. The scaffold has a voice made of timber, rope, and silence. It speaks before any official declaration begins. A priest leans close. The condemned listens or pretends to. Executioner's ceremony depends on several layers working together. The law names the crime. The ruler claims authority. The church frames the soul's danger. The crowd bears witness. The body pays the final price. Each layer supports the others, like stones in an arch. Remove one, and the whole meaning can tremble. This is why ritual mistakes matter. A bungled execution, a botched speech, a sympathetic prisoner, or a hostile crowd can turn punishment into embarrassment. Authorities know this. They want fear, but not chaos. They want tears, but not rebellion. They want pity directed toward the law, not against it. Public death must be emotionally disciplined. An open scholarly debate continues over whether medieval executions truly deterred crime or mainly reinforced political and moral order. Researchers at Stanford and Cambridge have explored deterrence, while other historians argue that ritual legitimacy and communal participation were equally important. The crowd may remember the punishment, but memory does not always prevent desperation. A hungry thief may still steal. Fear competes badly with hunger. The quirky tidbit here is that execution routes could become famous in themselves. Condemned people might be carried or walk through particular streets, stopping at churches, gates, or symbolic places connected with the crime. The journey created a moving lesson. Medieval towns, never ones to waste a perfectly good public route, turned geography into moral instruction. The road became part of the sentence. You can imagine it. A prisoner taken past the shop he robbed. A traitor drawn through streets he once crossed freely. A murderer led near the place where blood was spilled. The town forces the body to revisit meaning. It says, here is the wound, here is the offender, here is the answer. Whether the answer heals anything is less certain. For serious crimes, execution could take different forms depending on status, offence, jurisdiction, and custom. Nobles might receive methods considered more honourable. Commoners might receive more degrading deaths. Traitors could face punishments designed to express political horror. The body's treatment after death could also carry meaning, especially when authorities wished to extend warning beyond the moment of killing. Status followed people even to the edge. Equality before death was not equality before law. You hear the sentence read aloud. Many in the crowd cannot follow every legal phrase, but they understand tone, posture, and conclusion. The official voice gives shape to what is about to happen. It declares that this is not rage. This is judgment. This is not private revenge. This is public order. Yet the old smell of revenge never fully leaves. Execution carries traces of blood feud, sacrifice, cleansing, and royal command. It says the community has been injured and now watches injury returned under supervision. That supervision is the crucial difference. Violence becomes legitimate when properly framed. The scaffold is the frame. The condemned looks outward. For one moment, the crowd and the prisoner see each other clearly. Perhaps he searches for family. Perhaps he avoids their faces. Perhaps he hopes to seem brave, because reputation may outlive him among the living. Even condemned people care how they are remembered, especially then. The crowd studies him for signs. Does he repent? Does he tremble? Does he curse? Does he pray? Does he look innocent? Does he look exactly like everyone expected? The spectators are not passive. They interpret the death while it unfolds. They are making the meaning that authority hopes to control. A public execution is never fully owned by officials. It belongs also to the eyes that carry it away. The priest offers final words. The condemned answers softly. The rope is adjusted, or the blade prepared, or the necessary signal awaited. You do not need to linger on the physical detail. The true darkness lies not in the mechanics, but in the calm arrangement around them. People have built a whole structure so that death can feel official, even necessary. That is the ceremony's achievement. It makes killing seem like repair. The moment comes. The crowd tightens without moving. A few look away. Some stare harder. Someone gasps. A child begins to cry and is quickly hushed. Bells may ring. Prayers may be murmured. The body, once voice and fear and memory, becomes a completed message. The town exhales in pieces. Some spectators leave quickly, embarrassed by their own curiosity. Others remain. A few make comments that sound practical, as people often do when they have no language for discomfort. The officials continue their work. The clerk records what must be recorded. Law prefers endings that can be entered cleanly. But the square is not clean. Emotion remains underfoot. The execution does not conclude when the body falls still. It continues in stories, warnings, nightmares, tavern talk, sermons, songs, and parental threats. It continues when people pass the scaffold and glance upward. It continues when someone accused of another crime imagines the same steps beneath his feet. This is the purpose of public finality, to make one death multiply inside memory. Yet cruelty hides inside that multiplication. A society that teaches through death risks teaching people to gather around death. It tells them that order can be restored by watching a body lose everything. It trains them to think peace is something that may require a rope, a blade, a crowd, and a clerk. The sky brightens above the roofs. Market life creeps back carefully. A stallholder rearranges cloth. Someone bargains over onions in a quieter voice than usual. Mud dries along the edges of the square. The scaffold remains for a while, plain and wooden, somehow smaller now that its work is done. You stand at the edge of the crowd and feel the strange emptiness after ceremony. Authority has spoken. The town has watched. The condemned has vanished into memory and record. Everyone is expected to carry on as if balance has returned. Perhaps it has. Perhaps it has only been performed. And beneath the fading bell, you sense why medieval execution was so cruel. It did not merely end a life. It used that ending to teach obedience, stage certainty, and persuade the living that violence, when properly dressed, could look like peace. The account room is warmer than the prison, brighter than the chamber of questioning, and somehow not less troubling. A small fire burns near the wall. Wax drips beside ledgers. Parchment lies in careful stacks, weighted by a stone and a dull metal knife. The air smells of ink, smoke, wool, and dry dust. Outside, justice may roar in public, but here it murmurs through numbers. This is where punishment learns arithmetic. A fine is entered beside a name, a fee is noted, a forfeited animal is valued, a cart, cloak, knife, or strip of land may become part of the machinery. A family pays to settle a dispute, a debtor pays to escape confinement, a prisoner pays for food, a lord collects, a sheriff accounts, a king receives, pain becomes revenue. That is one of the darker truths of medieval justice. It was not only a moral system or a public ritual, it was also an economy. Courts cost money, generated money, and redistributed money. Punishment could shame the body, frighten the crowd, and fill the purse at the same time. The ledger does not look cruel. That is why it is dangerous. Records from medieval English royal courts, manorial courts, and urban administrations confirm that fines and fees were central to legal life. Scholars at Oxford, Cambridge, and the University of Chicago have studied these records to reconstruct daily conflict and institutional income. The gallows may dominate imagination, but the coin may have touched more lives. A fine could be ordinary, but ordinariness does not mean harmless. For a wealthy merchant, payment may be irritating. For a poor labourer, the same sum may mean hunger, pawned tools, delayed marriage, lost seed grain, or debt to someone worse than the court. Monetary punishment looks measured until you ask who is paying. Justice counts equally only in theory. Coins have different weights in different hands. You watch a clerk bend over the page. His fingers are stained with ink. He's not necessarily wicked. He may simply be competent, and competence can serve any master. He records amounts, dates, names, and obligations. The page grows orderly while the lives behind it remain tangled. There is a strange tidbit in medieval accounts where animals, tools, and everyday objects could be treated as legally significant property after sudden death. In English law, the object that caused a person's death could be forfeited as a deodand, at least in certain periods. A cartwheel, a boat, or an animal might acquire moral and financial meaning because misfortune had passed through it. Imagine being judged by a wheel. The old world did not always separate accident, guilt, value, and spiritual unease as cleanly as modern law tries to do. An object involved in death could seem marked. Its value could be redirected. The result was part belief, part compensation, part administration, and part that very human urge to make tragedy leave a receipt. Medieval justice loved receipts. It also loved bargaining. Not every conflict ended with blood. Many disputes ended with payment, pledge, settlement, surety, or compensation. Older traditions of feud and vergilde had already taught societies to place value on injury, life, peace, and insult. Even when royal and church authorities expanded, settlement remained powerful because communities needed to keep living together after harm. Money could stop revenge. Money could also disguise coercion. A family might accept compensation because it restored peace. Another might accept because it lacked the strength to demand more. A lord might encourage settlement to stabilize tenants. A king might prefer fines because dead offenders pay poorly, which is a very practical thought wrapped in royal dignity. The open scholarly debate here asks whether financial punishment softened medieval justice or exposed its inequality more clearly. Researchers at Yale and Princeton have shown that fines could reduce reliance on bodily punishment, while other historians argue that monetary penalties burden the poor and turn justice into extraction. Both interpretations sit together in the account room, not quite willing to look at each other. A coin can be mercy. A coin can be a chain. A fire crackles. The clerk turns a page. Somewhere in the building, someone coughs with a hollow sound. The account room continues without flinching. That is the peculiarity of financial cruelty. It does not need to raise its voice. It waits until harvest, inheritance, rent day, market day, or release day. Then it collects. Forfeiture could be especially severe. Goods connected to serious crime might be seized. Property could pass to lords or crown. Families could suffer for the actions of one member. In cases of treason, the consequences could reach deeply into inheritance and lineage. Punishment did not always stop at the condemned body. It travelled through household possessions, fields, tools, and future children. The dead could still bankrupt the living. This economic side helps explain why medieval authority cared so intensely about jurisdiction. Whoever had the right to judge might also have the right to collect. A lord, bishop, town, or king could defend legal privileges with remarkable energy because justice carried income as well as honour. Jurisdiction was not just a line on parchment. It was a stream of coins. Everyone wanted the stream. A town might guard its court rights. A monastery might defend exemptions. A lord might insist that tenants answer in his hall. A king might send officials to reclaim cases from local hands. Behind noble language about peace and order, there often moved a quieter question. Who gets paid? You can sense how this corrupts even sincere justice. A system that profits from fines may begin to prefer offences that can be priced. A jailer paid through fees may see prisoners as income. An official expecting payment may delay what should move quickly. A poor person may experience law not as protection, but as a series of doors that open only after money changes hands. The key is iron, the hinge is silver. Yet the economy of punishment also gave communities alternatives to endless violence. Compensation could prevent feuds. Sureties could bind neighbours into responsibility. Fines could shame without maiming. Payments to victims or authorities could mark wrong without creating another corpse. Medieval justice was cruel, but it was not always eager to kill. It could be coldly practical. That practicality is its own darkness. When suffering becomes manageable, countable, and profitable, it may become easier to tolerate. A spectacle shocks the senses. A ledger soothes them. It says everything has been measured. It says the disorder has a value. It says the matter is closed. But life rarely closes so neatly. A man leaves court owing more than he owns. A widow sells a goat to settle a fine. A family loses a tool needed for work. A prisoner's relatives scrape coins together for release. A tenant falls behind because punishment has eaten the margin between survival and ruin. The court record may show payment. It may not show the winter afterward. History often preserves the charge. It forgets the empty bowl. The room darkens as evening approaches. The clerk trims the candle. Shadows move across the ledgers, making columns blur into one another. Outside, the town settles into colder air. Doors close. Smoke rises. Somewhere, a child is told not to steal, not because theft is wrong in the abstract, but because everyone remembers what debt did to a neighbour. Fear can be inherited, so can caution, and now the shape of the whole system becomes clearer. Medieval justice was cruel because it had to communicate without modern machinery. It punished bodies because bodies could be seen. It used shame because reputation was survival. It demanded confession because hidden truth terrified legal minds. It used death because authority needed final symbols. It used money because institutions must feed themselves. No single explanation is enough. Cruelty grew from fear, faith, poverty, hierarchy, weak administration, sincere belief, political ambition, and the ordinary human desire to make uncertainty stop. It was not one monster. It was a village, a court, a church, a castle, a ledger, a crowd, and a bell ringing over all of them. You stand in the account room as the last light fades from the page. The ink dries, the fire lowers, the numbers remain, calm and patient, as if suffering has become another household expense. Perhaps that is the darkest truth. Not that medieval justice was always wild, but that it was often orderly. Not that cruelty came only from rage, but that it came from systems people trusted, defended, feared, and used. Not that the past was a nightmare separate from us, but that it reveals how easily human beings can make pain meaningful when order feels fragile. The clerk closes the book. The sound is soft, and the town beyond the wall keeps breathing. Now the night deepens, and the harsh shapes begin to lose their edges. The scaffold becomes only wood against the dark. The prison stones cool in silence. The courtroom benches sit empty, holding no voices for a while. Even the ledgers rest closed, their numbers hidden beneath leather and shadow. You do not need to carry every image with you. Let the bells fade. Let the market square empty. Let the narrow lanes soften until their mud becomes only darkness under a quiet sky. The people of that world sleep too, when they can. The clerk lays down his pen. The widow banks her fire. The guard leans against the gate and listens to distant dogs. Somewhere, a prisoner dreams of open fields. Somewhere, a priest whispers a final prayer to no one visible. The old world does not answer every question. It rarely does. It offers fragments, records, stains, customs, punishments, bargains, and rumours left in the dust of archives. From them, you glimpse a society trying to hold itself together with fear and faith, coin and ceremony, mercy and force. Perhaps it believed cruelty could protect peace. Perhaps it feared disorder more than suffering. Perhaps, in certain rooms, it could no longer tell the difference. And now, slowly, the candles go out one by one. The stone grows gentle in darkness. The road beyond the town wall disappears into mist. No judge speaks. No crowd gathers. No bell demands attention. There's only the soft breathing of night, folding over roofs, fields, rivers, and forgotten names. Rest there for a moment. The questions can wait, and perhaps the story is not yet complete. End of script. Good night.